Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining our webinar today. I think we will get going as people join online. We are talking about Copilot for Microsoft 365 and focusing on some of the governance practices, recommended governance practices that we suggest. And we will talk about just a quick overview of Copilot and go through just highlight some risks and issues as well. And I'll just give it over to Jeff for a quick intro to Copilot.
Awesome. Yeah, our focus obviously is on AI and specifically, Copilot as part of the Microsoft platform here. Um, for anyone who's not familiar, Copilot is not just a single product. It really is a brand that Microsoft has been creating, leveraging generative AI. If you go all the way back, right, you might have heard about the GitHub Copilot, which was one of the first Copilots out there. But now they're starting to develop, individual Copilots across all of the different products within the platform. And then your ability now to also generate and build your own Copilots is coming in. So, we're looking at a large variety of products rather than a single product across. And ultimately, right, Copilot is your AI assistant for work. It's not meant to, replace all of us, but it is a spot that we can kind of work through. It's integrated into all of our tools. So, we've got that single chat and destination for both web and work. We're seeing it across all of the Microsoft 365 apps these days. Some are a little bit behind the others, but they're all coming, I assure you. And then, we're leveraging things like the Microsoft Graph. And then as kind of talking about here, we also have Copilot Studio, which will allow us to create our own type of agents, essentially chatbots previously, into the platform as well, and really target our Copilots at content, leveraging all of the great enterprise-grade security and other features that are available in the Microsoft platform already. So some common scenarios, that you can kind of look at for M365. Really, it's kind of like having a handful of collaborators with you to work across, your day. So, you might do things like get Copilot to transcribe your meetings or summarize documents, sort of like you might do with a live assistant or, a clerk or someone like that. It can kind of act as your colleague. So, give you guidance and feedback on your writing, maybe help you clarify or brainstorm other ideas or points, being able to analyze some of your data as well, or even interpret a bit of that for you. So rather than always going to the colleague, you might be able to get some of those insights very quickly from Copilot. And then ultimately as well, can actually help coach you, right? So if you're like me, we always like to continue to learn, and Copilot can actually be leveraged for this as well, right? It can give you tips on how to improve some of that, writing or work, like say, help you in that creative process, be able to brainstorm new things, new ideas, and really kind of fast track and get you started. So kind of think of it as, that assistant to help you across kind of all these different areas, and allow you to help kind of improve a bit of that work. So we can look at, improving our performance or other things as well. So the the kind of advantage of leveraging Copilot over some of the other tools that are out there, right? There are some other free tools, that you can use and different things out there. But really, Copilots are integrated into the tools and apps that you're using already across the Microsoft 365 platform. It's understanding not just, the web content and what they've been trained on, but your work context as well, because your content is in there. We can extend those Copilots, and we can also, leverage the enterprise-grade security, privacy, and compliance that we get through the Microsoft 365 platform. So we don't have to go out and kind of, build all this stuff from scratch. If we're already leveraging Microsoft 365, Copilot's going to take advantage of all of the great features, tool sets that you already have in place there. So you'll be able to kind of get up and running and make sure it's secure and governed a lot quicker than if you go out to, a third-party application or something that's not already built into the platform that we're using. So that's really brief, a little bit on Copilot. If you're not super familiar with it, we'll pass it back to Jazz to talk a little bit about our organizational risks.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think we see the promise and maybe the potential a little bit with AI and with Copilot. However, we want to balance that. We want to have a good balanced approach. So I'm going to just touch on some organizational risks and things to be aware of with generative AI. And some of these you may have heard about as well, and maybe other talks or other media. But so I'll just touch on these. And then if you want to drill into any, please let me know. You can let us know in the comments as well. So we know, and this is from Microsoft Research, this quote from about a year ago, is that many organizations, they have concerns about implementing AI, and that's very fair, very understandable, because there, can be some confusion about the lack of controls to detect and mitigate risk. So in this webinar, we'll go through some of these controls and things you can start to use. But before I get there, I just wanted to highlight some of the specific things that are often thought about when you're thinking about risks or talking about risks. And these, I'm just broadly going to just talk about organizational risks, just so you know, not necessarily sort of societal risks or other things that are out there with talking about AI. But often, sometimes how we work, so potential changes to jobs does come up when talking about these solutions. And I see this, I'm a very kind of balanced person. I try to see both sides, and two things can be true at the same time. And so this is one especially where it can be both an opportunity and a risk. Of course, data exposure due to security and information architecture, that is a big concern as well. And having confidence that how you have implemented, say, your existing content, your existing information architecture and SharePoint, and going forward, that'll work well with Copilot is something that's a concern. And then inaccurate or bias information is definitely another big concern. So these are the big three ones that sort of Jeff and I see in our conversations when we're talking to our clients and other people about implementing Copilot. And so just quickly, I could probably talk about sort of jobs and how we work for an hour, but I won't. So I'll give you a quick high level about, AI and the conversation that tends to come up when talking about work. And we know that AI and Copilot is already changing how we work. And every powerful technology, we see this throughout history, is bringing changes to work. I'm kind of like, I love studying history. I don't know, I like reading about it. So going back to Luddites and thinking about weaving and how that's changed clothing manufacturing, email even. I'm old enough to kind of remember, using email for the past, I'll say 20 years. And it's changed definitely how we correspond, who does all the correspondence. We have more correspondence than ever. So that's been a huge change in how we work. And, banking, if you think about ATMs, that's another classic example, and how that's changed. But all these advances have led to, how I kind of see the other side of this has led to innovations, led to different ways of people doing things, maybe new offerings, new services we're doing. All the correspondence we do in email, for example, has led so many different business processes and automations. ATMs, we have fewer tellers now, maybe in banks, but with all of that has come the enablement of a whole bunch of digital banking services, right, and banking changes. So with everything, I just wanted to sort of add this as a good context. With everything, we have change to jobs. You could even say, destruction possibly, but creation outweighs destruction. And what I'm hoping that we kind of get out of this, when we think about when we're bringing this to our organizations, is we're very carefully thinking about the impact to jobs, because it is something that does come up. And I also believe as well, and this came up as a quote I was listening to in a podcast, but innovators and entrepreneurs, they keep coming up with new things that need to be done by people. There is sort of this field of opportunity, and maybe I'm being too Pollyanna, but I do believe that, we think about this carefully. We think about that change, and we involve the right people to think about retraining and evolving our job tasks. It's really key. So I could, again, spend a long time talking about this. It's not all Pollyanna, and it's not all risk and doom and gloom. There's somewhere in between. I think we can find sort of that balance. And there's a podcast here I just linked to if you're interested in learning about this. I thought I had a good overview. So the second risk I will talk about is data exposure. This is definitely one that comes up when thinking about confidential content. So think of an example like, customer data in a spreadsheet. And the question is, will AI, will Copilot, will these tools expose that content either internally or externally? And there could be implications sort of legal and compliance implications specifically, and risks in an organization. So this is one that we want to use governance tooling, and we'll talk more about this as well and how we can mitigate this risk. And as well, it sort of layers into this is thinking about the information architecture and the hygiene, so how content is being archived or not. That can impact the success as well of your AI deployment. So we'll talk about that in our last section too. And then the final risk, the third one in our list here, is inaccurate and biased information. So you probably heard this, you know, Gen AI famously produced hallucinations. And you know, the algorithm, the Gen AI algorithm itself, it's really good at putting words together. It doesn't decide, you know, what's true and what's not. And so organizations often have draft or incomplete documents, which Gen AI will use and Copilot will use as input. And so the problem here isn't that, you know, the large language model behind the scenes or the algorithm is, you know, lying or misinterpreting or hallucinating. It's that they're not designed to really sort of represent or understand what's true or what's not. Instead, they're really designed to convey sort of convincing lines of text. And what this means is employees, they will make potentially incorrect decisions or, you know, make responses to something based on inaccurate, incomplete, or biased information. So we want to watch out for this. It's definitely a concern, and testing and iteration is something that's really key to help mitigate this. As well, a tip that I heard from someone, an AI expert in the field, was, and you know, I do sometimes ask, I don't always follow this, but if you don't already know an answer to a question you're asking AI, check a few sources before trusting it. So it's really important, especially if you're asking Copilot or Gen AI something that maybe you don't know the answer. Also check with people, right? This is where the human element and that can come into play, is check with people before trusting it, check with experts or check other sources, do, you know, better, you know, more research, especially if you don't know the answer. Refining or editing things is a little bit different than asking something that's sort of broad and unknown. So just a little tip there. And so we know, you know, thinking about these risks, it's really important, imperative that we do this now because, you know, many people are bringing it to work. And so this quote here, this research was from Microsoft and LinkedIn from this past year, and they found 78% of AI users are bringing their own AI to work. So we want to get a handle on that, all those third-party tools as well as Copilot. And so that's why we're here. We're talking about some of our governance recommendations. We want to get ahead of these risks, start thinking about that governance. And so we'll go through our model, how we are thinking about the different places where we can look at how we're governing Copilot and some of the third-party AI tools. And getting ahead of it proactively can help us prepare. So I'll pass it over to Jeff to go through our model and recommendations.
Awesome. Yeah. So all these risks, right, that we're probably aware of, you know, some more than others. We do want to make sure that we're planning and preparing for those, right? As Jez said, users are bringing their own AI to work. You know, it's there. It's not going away. You know, every smartphone that comes out is having more and more AI. You'll see all the commercials, right? There's AI coming into all your products. So we've kind of broken it down into what we consider the 3 Ps of governance. So that's process, people, and platform. And all of these kind of tie together to create an overall strategy and governance plan for your organization. So the first one we'll talk about here is process, right? So we want to make sure that we're building AI into our business strategies, not thinking about them after the fact or leading with the technology. You know, we really want to make sure that you know, we're setting ourselves up for success, right? It's unlikely that you're going to block AI across your organization, right? Bring your own AI is already happening. People are very aware of ChatGPT and all these other things that are out there. Because every device these days is having AI incorporated into it, and it's only going to continue to advance. So whether you like it or not, it's there. So we want to be more proactive, right? So we want to start looking at how we build AI into our overall organizational strategies. We want to understand really, and define how AI actually will play a role, across everything we do within the organization, right? So depending on your organization, it's going to be a little bit different, but we want to be able to, leverage AI and also measure the value of that AI over time, right? It's great that AI is here. It's awesome that we all want it. But, if we're not measuring the value and the output of that AI, then we're missing a bit of our strategy and how we can really leverage AI going forward. So, we want to start looking at, some principles of AI and really starting to build, like say, a foundation for AI use across, your organization and the business itself. And this is just an example, right? UK government. So, obviously everyone is in kind of a similar spot right now. AI is here. We're all trying to get ahead of it, some faster than others, of course, but we want to be prepared. So this is just an example of some principles and things that are being built throughout, the UK government, as well as, of course, tons of other places and organizations as we get to see, this technology kind of grow in front of our eyes. So for you and your organizations, right, you want to make sure that you are defining policies and procedures today, even if you're not using AI at your organization today. Like I say, others probably are from their own devices and things like that. So you want to start looking at your usage policies. And should we allow third-party tools, right? What's an acceptable application to use in terms of Gen AI specifically, or other AI tools, right? Are we okay with the organization leveraging ChatGPT, right? Or do we want more in-house tools that we can govern a little bit better? Right, so looking at those, and then also considering the procedures, right? So as Jazz was kind of alluding to, right? Check your sources, but there should be a procedure or process that we follow after we generate content from, our copilots or other generative AI tools, right? We want to make sure that we are validating that information. Last thing we want to do is generate a bunch of information, copy paste it in an email and send it off. Without actually checking, right? So we want to make sure that we're validating that information, checking the sources, speaking with others who maybe are experts within the organization. Is this accurate today? And being able to kind of refine and give feedback on those processes and procedures internally is going to help you improve as an organization as well. So there's different kind of strategies around this. Most people don't want to read a giant, 10, 20 page document on all of your policies or procedures or what they can and can't do. So you can leverage other things, right? So, short videos, blog posts, little presentations, maybe some little snippets of pieces of your overall policy that you can build in. So this is just an example off of Microsoft's, responsible in AI in action. But it's a good model where you can start to leverage things that are a little more interesting and engaging to really bring this forefront to your employees. Like I say, without kind of saying, here's a 10-page document, please read this and sign off. So just continue to get it in front of them, what you want to do from a process and procedure standpoint. And then best advice we can kind of give you is plan a little, iterate a lot. It's going to take time. All of us are learning AI, right? It's a newer, generative AI is newer. There is changes happening. We're all starting to learn, figure out how it works best, what it works best for, how to really create prompts that are useful, all that kind of stuff. So, plan this all out, but start testing, start iterating, look for ways to improve, both on the use as well as the technology itself, if you're building out your own copilots and things like that. One of the things that can be useful is also a prompt library. So generative AI is, of course, prompt-based. So we need to create prompts in order to ask for certain information. And you can really leverage a tool like this to start tracking prompts that are useful, help making your organization a little more aware of how they can really craft good prompts. There's lots of examples out there, prompt libraries and things like that, but creating an in-house useful prompt library can really be advantageous. And there's open source Power Apps and other things out there that you can leverage as a foundation and starting point. Some of them have a little bit of a gamification where you can upvote prompts and things like that that you think are more useful, which can encourage, again, kind of that sharing, open culture, all that kind of stuff within your organization. And once you've built out your process and procedures, you're looking at your strategies, then the next step is kind of taking the people aspect into it. So Jazz is going to talk a bit more about people, since she wanted to talk about it for an hour anyway. There you go.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. I just want to add as well, just going back to this last point, there are links in the slide deck. So stay tuned to our email, which will have the PDF of the slides, and you can get to some of these links if you're interested in getting or seeing these open source options for building a prompt library. Just wanted to mention that. So I will touch on people, and one of the first things when thinking about, how we're going to roll this out, thinking about it carefully, is of course, just like any other sort of knowledge management, digital transformation project, we want to think about the roles and responsibilities and make sure that the right people are involved for rolling out Copilot and AI in your organization. Often this does look like sort of a cross-functional team. It could involve sort of compliance and risk officers. It could involve as well HR when thinking about jobs and workforce. And also the experts, right? So there's going to be a lot of experts, especially in the technology divisions in your organization as well, who can, understand sort of the capabilities of AI, understand where it works well, maybe potentially where it doesn't, things we should use it for, maybe things we shouldn't. And all those kinds of stories are going to really help roll out AI and roll out Copilot in your organization. And there might also be an opportunity here for new roles. And so thinking about that too, and how jobs are changing, there may be an opportunity here for looking at, whether it's job retraining or whether looking at its automation or extending AI, those could be new roles. And this is just an example governance structure that we've seen at other organizations and help them sort of define. And so take this as sort of inspiration if you're thinking about the roles, responsibilities, and how to structure your team. Typically what this looks like is, so I'll just walk through here from sort of left to right. What this looks like is there is a steering committee or sort of a management committee here, and there are usually some cross-functional leadership positions here. So there's HR, IT, legal, are sort of the common ones, in information management, team member, compliance, those sorts of things could also be a useful sort of value add on that type of steering committee. And they're really looking at the strategy. They're looking at what are the major decisions, what are the acceptable tools and systems, third parties that we're going to be using here. Any integration points and planning for that are going to come out of this steering committee. And then on the information systems technology, they have a large role to play here as well, and being responsible for the implementation itself, especially if you're looking at Microsoft 365 and Copilot, and the configurations behind the scenes that are supporting a successful rollout, especially from a security and a compliance standpoint. And so those things look like sensitivity labels, data loss policies, and conditional access, and looking at the reports as well, and understanding potentially where some risk areas are and being able to then take some action. And then we have an analyst, or maybe business analysts, the innovation team, sort of the product leads. There's all kinds of names for this group, and they're looking at we know we want to get to this this vision, right? And so we want to design for that. We want to plan for it. They're also getting reports from both users and probably from the system, Microsoft 365 itself, and understanding what people are doing, what's working well, and maybe where areas of improvements are. And then the solutions team, they'll maybe be part of IT, but they're helping implement, especially if you're extending Copilot, looking into building out, maybe you're putting Copilot or generative AI into a Power App, for example. That's coming up as more and more of a use case, or even building out the chatbot using Copilot Studio. So they're kind of in the nuts and bolts of building those solutions out. And then, of course, we have departments who are going to be using those tools every day and giving feedback. Especially, they have a role to play around the information architecture side of things, tagging of content, labeling. If that's part of the sensitivity label strategy, is having users use those labels. If it's not happening in an automated way, hopefully it is. But if it's not, they'll have to be involved in doing that as well. So that's sort of what it could look like in terms of roles and responsibilities. And, of course, some people will be more actively involved than others. And on the other point about people as well, and I mentioned this earlier in the risks section there, was talking about job redesign. There's a lot of information coming out in this space, in the HR space. And, if you're interested, I encourage you to do some research and talk to some experts in this area, as well as involve your HR team. And so I've just linked to this one article. It's just one example of thinking about how to redesign jobs and thinking about it not necessarily like jobs, but thinking about tasks. What are the individual tasks people are doing? So this can take a little bit of discussion, a little bit of debate, but then that'll help you figure out what processes are designed or could be facilitated, helped with by AI. So thinking about tasks, how are you going to reconstitute that into processes, and then helping to refocus people. So I think, it comes down to taking the time to work with your experts on work, maybe that's on your HR team, and reviewing the tasks that are a part of a job, and then creating a path forward with consultation with people. So
Yeah,
that's
Jazz, I was just
high
say,
level
Jazz,
for people.
I think that's a great point, right? Like, if a lot of times when we think about jobs, it's thinking about, okay, well, what jobs do we need to either develop AI or build AI? But there's a change when we're using the AI to kind of all tasks within jobs, that needs to be considered. So I think that's a really key point there in terms of, right, you need to be looking at what new jobs are created through the technology, but also what changes in the task level happens throughout the jobs that do exist today as well. So that
Yeah,
was really
that's
good.
perfect. Yep. Yeah, no, thank you for clarify that. I just want to also mention, of course, education. Education and training are critical to successful rollouts of any digital transformation project. Same thing here. We want to start education as soon as we can. Hopefully, we're thinking about what's responsible AI use, starting there with sharing those stories. Also demonstrating, of course, change management best practice is to have the top-down support, demonstrate the right behavior, and having that leadership support is really important as well. Giving people, whether it's formal training or videos or tips or email suggestions, anything to help them think about how they're going to incorporate AI and Copilot into their daily work. And the next level is to, of course, pair this education and training with scenarios. And Microsoft has a really great success kit, if you haven't seen it yet, which has a lot of adoption recommendations and education recommendations as well. They really break down by department different scenarios where Copilot can add value. So definitely recommend to take a look at that. And yeah, let us know as well if you want some help or advice with that. It's a good resource for sure. And
Hey,
yeah, I'll pass it over to Jeff for our last governance
yeah.
part of the model platform.
Yeah, the platform. So yeah, it's great when we have our processes and our people and everyone's on board, but we do want to be able to leverage the platform and the technology effectively and efficiently. So we kind of break it down into three areas again. So within the platform, we're focused heavily on design. So our SharePoint, our content sources, they need to be designed to support AI initiatives as well as a lot of your other initiatives as well. Um, and then we need to make sure we're securing content and also monitoring and reporting regularly on, the security around the content, as well as, some of the risks and exposure that we maybe have. And then lastly, right, we need to be able to manage the life cycle of our content. Again, we don't want old content, obsolete content, things like that maybe aren't going to get us the best results or create, more validation and effort and work downstream that needs to be done. So we kind of break it down, the design, the secure, the manage. And that's kind of our philosophy to, how we design M365 and other content sources to be able to leverage our our AI. So starting with our design, it is very critical that you have a good design, right? AI is not a magic wand. We get a lot of well, it's hard to find information. Our content's not great. We've got a lot of multiple copies, obsolete content. Things are kicking around for too many years. Everyone has access to the content. All these kind of major issues that a lot of organizations tend to face with their data and their information. AI doesn't fix that, right? We're not going to all of a sudden, flick that magic switch, have AI turned on, and everything's great, and you get the exact information you want, and there's no issues anymore. What really, sets you up for success and where those fixes come from is really a solid foundation in your content sources. So we're looking at SharePoint here as part of Microsoft 365, but that solid foundation, that IA, that structure, that security around that structure of content, that all sets you up for success across many aspects, right? So it's going to set you up for success for your records management programs. It's going to help you with your privacy. It's going to allow you to do things like integrations and automation more seamlessly. And ultimately, it's going to allow you to layer on artificial intelligence in an effective, efficient, and useful way. So you're able to build upon the solid foundation in your information architecture in order to then extend the platform, create more efficiencies, and a better experience for your users at the end of the day. You might have, if you've been around for a while, you might have been in an organization and you might have gone from a file share into SharePoint, found that, okay, well, this messy content moves into SharePoint. Maybe you've tried to upgrade from SharePoint 2010 to 2013 to fix your problems, 2013 to 2016. Ultimately, if you don't create that foundation, if you don't take the time, you're just going to end up with this. So you're going to go from one spot with messy content to another spot with messy content. So that foundation really sets that structure out. Where you can move between platforms or other areas, but we want a nice, organized, useful section or IA, an organization of our content, and that's going to then allow AI as well as your users just to find that content, leverage that content easier. So it's really important that you set that foundation before you start turning on all these other tools because they won't fix those problems. So when we're designing for your content, AI today is not great at understanding sarcasm, humor, outdated content, versions, all that kind of stuff that we've alluded to already. It has less context than a human. So you might be able to identify that this policy is no longer useful just from your general knowledge, but can AI do that, right? It's not talking with, the rest of your coworkers and things at the water cooler or over Teams or things like that. So it might have a harder time figuring that out. So your content management is even more critical as we move into this world of AI. So kind of looking back at that last graphic, right? No lift and shifts of your messy content. You're just going to continue to bring those issues forward from system to system, from technology to technology. So you really want to leverage, a solid foundation of your IA, apply some structure, apply metadata, make sure that you're set up for future success with all of these other tools that are available to us. And I'll pass it over to Jazz to talk a little bit about securing your content and then being able to monitor and report on it as well.
All right, so we know security, it's just become even more important. I mean, it's been really important for decades, but it's even more important now in this world of AI because more content potentially could be exposed. Maybe it was obscure or hard to find before, but now it could be exposed with these powerful tools that can really find and summarize a whole bunch of content very quickly. And even sensitive content such as information that you may not want to share more broadly, like layoffs or other things, who knows. So this is a very similar to the search issues. I've been working in this knowledge management space for a while, but it's very similar to me to the search issues that we used to be worried about before, where maybe search would expose content. And so we were addressing those issues by making sure we were securing sites properly in SharePoint, we were keeping things out of navigation or things like that, and just making sure we had that right model in place. And that'll, again, as Jeff was saying and talking about having that foundation, it'll help us when we're rolling out Copilot and AI tools as well. And if you are in a situation where maybe your search tool hasn't been that great, hasn't worked that well, we hear that often too. And so maybe you're getting some security by obscurity and that's worked for you, that will probably potentially not work with you for you when it comes to rolling out AI. So we want to pay attention to this. And Microsoft, of course, has tons of tools, tons of features and capabilities in Purview, as well as Microsoft 365 to help with making that foundation secure. And so what we find is the most useful when thinking about Copilot is looking at sensitivity labels and DLP policies to really make sure that the sensitive sites, the sensitive areas are labeled properly and that they, you can't take content from there by mistake. As well, SharePoint Advanced Management, if you haven't seen it yet, is part of SharePoint Administration 2. And so it's another layer, another add-on, but we do find it has some reports and capabilities that are helpful when planning to roll out Copilot. And so we have a blog post as well, which you can get access to and find on our website that goes into some of these reports and capabilities in more details. But what this is, essentially, I like to think of this as proactive management. That's some of the really key benefits that SAM or SharePoint Advanced Management is giving you. And there's different features like the ones listed here on the slide, and setting some policies, setting some restrictions for sensitive sites, like I mentioned. But we find especially paying attention to areas where content is shared, where sharing links have been created, is helpful to look at to assess whether some of the content may be at risk or exposure through AI tools. And so you can get into SharePoint Advanced Management through the Admin Center. And so if you haven't seen this yet, just a little quick overview, screenshots of it. But there is an Advanced Management section. It's labeled Pro because it may require a, per user, so depending what your licensing is, may require a additional license there. And there is the ability to get a free trial as well. And one of the areas I just want to highlight when planning for Copilot is to look at the data access governance reports, because there are a few reports in here, especially around oversharing, as I mentioned. So that's where you can see sharing links and are things being shared, potentially being overshared. Are people creating lots of sharing links that maybe they forgot about? So that taking a look and looking at those reports can help you along this journey. As well, there's a sensitivity labels report as well. And the last one here, this may or may not, this probably doesn't apply for the Copilot situation, but it does help you with monitoring what is shared externally. So it can help you that perspective. And I mentioned sensitivity labels is another key foundational piece. And so if you haven't heard of them, don't use them yet. I mean, you can think of them. I like to think of them almost as like a stamp, a digital version of a stamp. But they have a lot more superpowers. They can do things like encrypt content, things like that. And Copilot, how this works with Copilot is it respects the label with the highest priority and then makes that available to users. And so when, say, encryption is implied, when you've applied that through your sensitivity label, through your policy, then Copilot will check for what's called the extract right. So that's like a usage right behind the scenes. And only then, if a user has that right, can that data then be returned by Copilot? So, and it doesn't use it if it's not permitted. So just, it does help with really sort of locking down and making sure only the people that have the rights can see that content or have use of that content through Copilot. It's a very powerful foundational tool. As well, if you have been poking around Purview at all or you manage your system at your organization, you probably have come across audit logs. And these are changing. Microsoft is rolling out more activities and things that they monitor as part of Purview audit. But there is some, if you want if you're looking at this regularly, incorporating it to look at what Copilot behaviors are happening in your organization can then, again, help you understand any security risks, but also help you evolve and improve how people are using Copilot. So it's another place to just keep your eye on as well, is to look at the Purview audit logs. And then a newer part of the toolkit I wanted to mention in terms of security and preparing for Copilot is the Purview AI Hub. And I believe it still is in preview today. And it's it's a new feature set that Microsoft is rolling out to help you mitigate and manage the risks that are maybe associated with using AI within your organization. And it doesn't just focus on Copilot, it also monitors usage of third-party AI apps, and there's a long list on their website. They're adding all the time of the different apps that they're monitoring and incorporating into this. And so there's some ready to use policies that are part of this, but also just some reports and some data that you can see. And so I have just a few slides just to show you this sort of more up close so you can get a sense of how this works. So this is just a sample tenant sample data. So in this case, what it's finding is it's surfacing any what it's perceiving as unethical behavior, and then giving you the ability to go into it, just like your audit log. So it's basically, it's a little subset of your audit log. You can go in and view the activity. And all of that detail, viewing the activity, you can get through this main page, but also through the Activity Explorer. So that's really handy for compliance administrators to go in and to understand what the activity was. And I should mention, in terms of setting this up, global administration is not enough. You do want to have assigned the right roles in Purview to view this information. So that would be compliance administration, and then potentially insider risk management as well, to see some additional reports. And so there's some highlights here, some dashboards, viewing usage and trends. And then when you go into it, there is some recommendations where it will suggest policies that you can create, or in some cases, it will create on your behalf. And so making sure you understand what's happening, what is adaptive protection, if that's something that you maybe are not using today, just understanding what that impact is a really important part of governing this and securing this solution. But I do find it useful, right? It is giving you some recommendations of, applying this policy to not just Copilot, but also third-party AI apps. So this is just one to block sensitive information in third-party apps. And then in the Activity Explorer section, there are some more detailed reports and graphs. And so this is what's showing, tying back to sensitivity labels and setting up what's called sensitive information types. It will highlight if any of that information has been detected or been shared in AI apps. And so as a compliance admin, it can be a trigger to help you sort of investigate and follow up on some of these interactions. So again, going back to that foundation, look at Purview, how you're using it. Are you using sensitivity labels? Are you setting up the right sensitive information types that you need? And then you'll be able, have more confidence as you go forward with rolling out your AI solutions.
Awesome.
So that's a deeper dive into security, and we'll get into the lifecycle part.
Yeah, so we've got this great foundation of structure in SharePoint, and then we secured that content. We're reporting on the security around that content, but then lastly, we need to manage the lifecycle of that content, right? You don't want people making decisions based off of old policies. You don't want to rely on end users either to delete content over time. We want to really start to look at how we can automate the life cycle of that content. Tooling is always going to be better. We know that it's difficult for people to know how often or how long they need to keep stuff according to your file plan, legal obligations, all that kind of stuff. So we want to really start to manage the life cycle of our content within the platform for not just generative AI, because it's going to use all that content, but for the rest of your organizational risk as well. But the better we can manage that life cycle of the content, the better your results over time will be with your generative AI, and the more useful they'll be without having to go through and validate as much and really double check and make sure that the content coming out is the appropriate content. So we want to automate, our records management as much as possible there. Some of that can be archiving. So you might need to keep all your old obsolete policies, but we don't necessarily need them to be front and center. We don't need everybody maybe to have continued access to those old policies. If we go back to the paper days, we would send things off to, say, Iron Mountain or a warehouse for long-term storage, and a request process would generally go through, your records management team, somebody that's in charge of that, in order to go, get those boxes returned, check that content, etc. The same can work for your digital content, right? You can archive things into, a location that maybe doesn't have as many permissions, or even consider removing permissions on an old stale site, but maybe you need to keep that site. So you can archive entire sites, you can archive content. There's different tools out there. Microsoft's recently come out with their archiving solution as well. Great thing about theirs, of course, is it incorporates the rest of the platform. So if you do leverage, Purview's information protection for records management, that will be respected through the archiving. Whereas with some other tools, there might be some other features that you need to kind of layer on to match up your file plan and things like that. But it's important to archive that old content, keep it around when you need to, but not make it as readily available for both users and generative AI to pick up on. And then your records management itself, right? As I was kind of talking about, we want to automate that. It's not likely that your users are going through deleting old content, cleaning up old drafts. Likely all that stuff's sticking around, and it will continue to stick around. So you want to make sure that you're implementing, a solution to dispose of that content over time. Again, you can use Microsoft Purview, or there's lots of third-party tools out here to help you kind of manage and automate that life cycle of your content. But we're going to make sure that we're reducing our risk, not just from generative AI, but just overall, right? So the more we reduce that clutter, that rot, the better results we'll get from our generative AI, and the less risk in general that we'll have. So right, the benefits are not just for AI, but all the way across your organization. Just a quick example here of what a file plan can look like in Purview, but you've got all of your kind of retention based off of the different rules and locations and things that you've set up that can map back to your file plan. And one of the more interesting things here, and this kind of alludes to one of the questions that was in the chat about should we monitor or include in our AI usage policies, a report or a summary of the Copilot prompts that are being used and what's being generated out of them. Well, the platform does do this. So there is Copilot prompt retention, so you can audit actions like Jazz was showing in the reporting, but we can also control the life cycle of our prompts themselves. So right now they lump these in with Teams chat, just the way it works. So if you're already implementing something like a Teams chat policy that's deleting your Teams chats over time, you may want to consider looking at that again, right? So if we're leveraging Copilot, we need to keep these for longer. For either, your strategy purposes, you want to be able to prove where that information was coming from, or in the future, right, if you're doing FOI requests, freedom of information requests, you may be required to actually produce these prompts as part of those FOI requests, right? So just building that into your strategy as well, and consider, right, does my Teams chat policy align with what's necessary for my Copilot retention policy, and just kind of re-looking at these things. But ultimately, we want to control the life cycle of our content, and prompts are part of our content now, right? So all of this is going in, being stored, just like emails, chat histories, etc., right? These become part of our data, part of our content. They're tracked, they're auditable, and we can leverage these to help us out in certain situations, or like say, you may be required legally in the future to provide these as part of your FOI requests, as the legal landscape around all of this is changing as well. Okay, I'll
Excellent.
let Jazz kind of
Yeah.
summarize things for us and take us through the end here.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure we have some time for some questions. And just to recap, we talked about having a strong design foundation, how to implement or some tips for implementing security measures, and also monitoring and reporting, as well as looking at some of the content lifecycle controls, including records management, audit, and archive. And so, we just want to leave you with, of course, we all know it's coming, you can't ignore it. And looking at your people and your process and your platform strategies as a sort of a holistic view of governance and planning for that can really help you roll out AI and Copilot in a very successful way in your organization, but also in a way that is compliant as well. And so start education and training as early as you can. And, we'd love to hear some of the stories as well if you're seeing any benefits and things that are happening. So I just put up our Q&A slide here, and our email addresses are there as well if you want to reach out to us directly. And so I have not been looking at the chat channel, but is there
There's there's
some
a
questions, Jeff, that we want to address?
Yeah, there's a few good ones. So kind of just spoke to this one, but it was a question, should an AI use policy, include something to ensure that the use of AI, which AI was involved, can be, used in the creation of a report or summary statement. So looking at, breadcrumb trail or, who to credit that statement for or blame. So right, we throughout the presentation we kind of alluded that yeah, you want to validate that information, you want to be checking sources, you want to ensure that you're not pulling through, but it should definitely be included, right, as part of the process procedures, on how you're going to report on this, what your obligations are, to produce those prompts potentially, or leveraging those prompts as a way to say, yeah, this was generated by AI and look into that, right? Now, you might not be able to pass all the blame to AI because at the end of the day, it could be your content still that's being pulled, but you should definitely build that into your policies and continue to report, monitor, audit, all that kind of stuff as you go forward.
And I'll just add too, it's looking at even just simple wording and how you're going to label things that maybe were created with the help of AI and then labeling what model was
Mhm.
used can also be a way to just action on that policy. And so I know as part of just internally here at Gravity Union, we've put that wording, suggested wording into any documents that may have some input from AI. So that's part of just our word template. And so you may want to look at doing things like that to just spark that reminder for people.
Yeah, even when you're looking at transcripts or summaries of meetings that come from Copilot now, they do mention at the top, right? Validate, check for accurate information, et cetera, right? So yeah, it's summarizing information, but it's doing that based off of the transcript of what was talked about. So if you're joking or sarcasm or things like that, there could be inaccurate information. So you always want to be validating. Another good question that we have is on the governance structure that you were talking about, Jazz, with the steering committee and everything. Um, should IT own the decisions, or should it be more of an org-wide decision around the use of AI and the technologies that are implemented at the organization?
Mm. Well,
Uh,
I definitely think it should be a partnership. I think, as most things, we collaborate a lot. And I think IT is going to be a huge driver for sure of making some of these decisions and have big input as well. And but also understanding from other teams' perspective, other roles, responsibilities, especially legal compliance folks and HR, and potentially any kind of work changes. That could also be another role on your steering committee. So I think it is a partnership, a strategic partnership and rollout typically. That's what I
Yeah,
see.
definitely.
What
I
do you,
think
Jeff? Yeah.
it's too big of a topic to be owned and led by a single group or department at the organization, right? There needs to be this joint understanding of how the business is leveraging AI, what's required from a legal or compliance perspective, as you mentioned, right? So I think 100% there has to be IT involvement, right? You're going to help set up certain tools, technologies, and at the end of the day, help you report, monitor, and all that kind of stuff. But the strategy needs to develop kind of across all departments and use cases and all of that. So I think it is definitely that
And
joint
power
effort.
users, I should mention that too.
Mhm.
They'll be a source of scenarios and innovation.
Definitely. Um, One that we have here is in the context of having an archive SP site of content that is obsolete, superseded, but must be retained for other reasons. Can it be excluded from Copilot using it for responses to prompts? Um, so there's no exclude that I'm aware of today. However, right, if we're removing permissions and things like that, Copilot's only going to return content that you have access to. So depending on the user, right, if someone is maintaining access to that site, yes, they might be able to pull some of that directly through. But we can potentially look at other things like sensitivity labels or, request-based
And also
access.
yeah, the Microsoft Archive solution,
Mhm.
it does put things into what's called inactive mode. So I don't believe, I'd have to 100% check, but I don't believe those will be returned in Copilot because they've become inactive. So there would be, that's another option, I think.
Yeah, some of the technologies are changing as they make adjustments too. So in the future we might be able to specifically exclude. Of course, if you're building your own custom copilots, you can point it at whatever content you want. So you can pick and choose what content to include in those as well. So the agents are really great for that.
I just want to let you know too, we're here to help if you have any questions, as I mentioned, but also if you're interested in any help with rolling out Copilot, we have some workshop offerings as well as help with deploying and integrating into your work processes using Power Platform. And a little plug for licenses if you're looking to try this out, because that is the best way to learn it, is just to start trying it, start to iterate, start to learn. We're offering a discount until the end of the year if you want to reach out to us on that. And I'll again put our emails up and just some of our links as well. So love to hear from you. So thanks so much for joining. We really appreciate you spending your time here with us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
So
Thank
thanks
you.
everyone.